Hi, everyone. It was a massive funeral, and everyone was there. For 30 days, everyone, man, woman, and child, cried. That's right, it was at the time of the death of Aaron, described in the Shabbos Torah reading, that we see just how far Aaron HaKohen's impact reached. Indeed, the Torah tells us, "Vayiru kol ha'ida ki gava Aaron." The entire community saw that Aaron had died. Vayivku es Aaron shloshim yom kol beis Yisrael. The entire house of Am Yisrael wept for Aaron for 30 days. Now Rashi, citing the Medrash, notes that the men and the women cried because Aaron would pursue peace and instill love between quarreling parties and between husbands and wives. That's a sharp contrast to that which we read about the people's reaction to the death of Moshe Rabbeinu, where we're told in Parshas V'zos HaBracha, "Vayivku b'nei Yisrael es Moshe," that b'nei Yisrael wept for Moshe for 30 days. And again, Rashi there cites the Medrash that it was only the men who cried, as opposed to when Aaron died, when everyone cried. Since Aaron was Rodei Shalom, Oiv Shalom, V'Rodei Shalom, V'nosein Shalom Be'ish L'Reyehu Be'ni Shalom Ba'ala, as Rashi says, he was one who pursued peace and established peace between man and his neighbor and between husbands and wives. And so hence by Aaron we find Kol Beis Yisrael, everyone, men and women, sharing in the grief over his death. So intense was that grief that the funeral is described in Maseches Kala Rabasi as having 80,000 young people named Aaron following the bier of Aaron HaKohen. The 80,000 boys named Aaron were so named because they were born into families where the husband and wife had been on the brink of divorce, and Aaron HaKohen stepped in and was able to successfully reunite the couple. Upon their successful reunification, they had children, whom they named in honor of Aaron. These 80,000 boys existed only due to the efforts of Aaron HaKohen's marriage and marriage therapy ability. So taken statistically then, Aaron HaKohen had single-handedly treated 13.25% of the marriages among the Jewish nation at the time. That sounds like an incredible amount of marital discord in what seems to be a generation that was so spiritual that it witnessed so many miracles. What was Aaron's amazing trick? How'd he do it? And while we're at it, what was the point in knowing that the people cried for 30 days? What's the ultimate benefit of their tears? Now, I get it if the Torah would tell us that they did something in honor of the work that Aaron had put into their families, maybe build a marriage counseling facility, or maybe fund a program to prepare couples for dealing with differences in their families. We have other examples throughout Jewish history where these type of appropriate memorials were established. But just crying about it and then reporting it, what's the point of the mention? What does the 30 days of tears ultimately lead the nation and its families to do? You know, Aaron HaKohen was no ordinary marriage therapist. Chazal tell us whenever he came across two parties who weren't speaking, whether it was two Jews or even a couple, husband and wife, he used a great trick. First, he would go to one party and tell him, "My child, see what your friend is going through. See how his heart's torn, how he's tearing his clothes and telling himself, 'What am I going to do? I'm so embarrassed because I did wrong to him. How will I ever be able to face him or her again?'" And then he'd go to the other aggrieved party and say to him or her, "My child, don't you see what your friend's going through? Tearing his or her clothes and asking, 'What am I going to do? I'm so embarrassed because I did wrong to him. How am I able to face him or her again?'" And he would sit with each party until their personal hurt from the other side was subdued enough so that when they met up together, they wept together and they solved their differences. It seems like a great technique, but how did it work for 40 years? How was it that over 80,000 times that he used this trick, no one ever said to Aaron, "No offense, Rabbi, I wronged him, but that was a nice try"? How is it that nobody said, "I saw this trick already when you used it on my neighbor, but my situation isn't totally different"? No one? In 40 years? Why wouldn't we continue to use this technique exclusively today? So the late great Maggid of Yerushalayim, Rav Yaakov Galinsky, notes that fires don't burn single trees. They burn two or three at a time. He explained that fights, like fire, need two parties at a minimum. The only question is to which one is more guilty and which one less so. So who's more responsible? Shlomo HaMelech noted that whenever a person does, whatever a person does, he thinks it's yashar, it's proper. In fact, further in Mishlei, Shlomo HaMelech says it's even zach. Whatever a person does in his own eyes is pure and blameless. In other words, when two parties argue, each party automatically assumes that because he's right, the other one must be indeed guilty. And so, when that's the case, Aaron was pretty sure that when he sat and said that the other person is broken up because he feels guilty, no one would argue that the friend or the spouse was guilty because that's what they believe themselves. And this idea also helps us understand why Aaron never told the person that it was him or her who was guilty. When people see themselves as blameless and faultless, they don't hear any other side. Adam never saw his blame. He turned on his wife instead. She, in turn, blamed the Nachash. Kayin says the Medrash, blamed Hashem for not protecting Hevel from the death. And Avimelech also claims he was innocent for taking Sarah. Even Manoach and his wife, Shimshon's parents, argue about who is responsible for their fertility difficulties, to the point that even when his wife knew who had the challenge, her, she didn't even reveal it. So being told you will share or bear the guilt or responsibility for the fight turns people off, and it just keeps them fighting. Aaron didn't do that. He got the people to come around to let go, to be mevater and give in on the wrong that was done to them. Because once that side hears that his or her supposed adversary is indeed torn up about a situation, that's all they needed to hear in the first place. So yeah, the people cried at his funeral for the next 40 and for the next 30 days because they lost a master peacemaker, but they never lost his technique. Indeed, the great Tana Hillel teaches us in Pirkei Avos, Havemi Talmidav Shel Aharon, Oev Shalom Verodev Shalom, that we need to be students of Aaron, lovers of peace and chasers of peace. Now, why does he tell us to be like Aaron's students? Why can't we just say, Hillel Omer, Have Oev Shalom Verodev Shalom, that we should be lovers and pursuers of peace? Rav Elazar Askiri noted that in our lives, there are many who say that they lack capacity to forgive or to find room for peace. To these people, it's not enough to say, be a Rodei Shalom and a Oe Shalom, to run after peace and pursue it. So instead, we have to tell them, be like students of Aaron. Because as Rav Yisrael Meir Lau expanded, when all the members of Am Yisrael are able to cry for Aaron, it must be because they consider themselves to be close students of his. Those tears were not ones of abandonment of responsibility. They were tears of recognition of responsibility, to take up the mantle and the mission of Aaron, and to recognize and realize that everyone can change their styles or their positions in order to pursue the virtue of peace within our marriages, homes, and communities. So Aaron died, and then the nation cried. Men, women, and children. Why? Because they all felt his loss personally. Why? Because Aaron didn't play tricks. He played hearts. If Aaron walked around our Jewish streets today and he heard the discord between people or reading it on their phones and texts, he probably wouldn't sigh and just say, people these days. He'd roll up his sleeves, pour 2 cups of coffee, and start his legendary diplomacy. And maybe it's time we carried a treatment plan like Aaron's, with his legendary 3 daily doses of peace, and try to implement it with the people around us. 1, assume the other person regrets it, even if they didn't say it. 2, give up being right if you can be at peace. And 3, stretch for peace the way that Aaron stretched the truth, not to deceive, but in order to heal. You know, we all know people who live in a constant state of Cold War, relatives, married couples, friends, partners, neighbors. They need someone to believe in both sides. They need someone to say, I know this hurts, but I also know they're hurting too. We can be that person. We ought to try, just like Aaron taught us to. You know, Aaron got 80,000 kids named after him. And that's 80,000 families saved from the brink. If we try the Aaron approach and bring Shalom bein Adam lechavero, bein ish leishto, our own names might not be on 80,000 birth certificates, but it might just be written somewhere else on another little more permanent basis, where it sits on the list of people who count themselves as Talmidav Shel Aharon, the title student of Aaron. Wishing you and yours a Shabbat Shalom and a Shabbat Shalom to all.